Next, the latest in the war between Israel and Hamas. The Hamas-run health ministry says dozens of Palestinians have been killed in recent days by the Israeli forces in central Gaza. This is video newly into us from the Palestine Red Crescent Society showing people from the rubble of what they say is a residential apartment building hit by an Israeli airstrike. There is heavy fighting concentrated still in central Gaza, where thousands of Palestinians are sheltering. Fighting is also ongoing to the south in Khan Yunis. The Israeli defense minister has said it plans to push on to the southernmost city of Rafah in the offensive. Now, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is traveling to the area today. His fifth visit since the October 7th Hamas attack and the war that has followed. Blinken is trying to secure another diplomatic push and agree on a second ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas. Let's bring in Richard Madden from our Washington bureau. Again, this trip, another of a flurry of high-level diplomacy. Richard, what is the Secretary of State trying to secure here?
Yeah, good morning, Heather. This is trip number 5, as you noted, by Secretary Blinken to the Middle East since the Israel-Hamas war began. It also comes days after the U.S. launched counterattacks against Iranian-backed militants in Syria, Iraq, and now Yemen. More signs this conflict is escalating, potentially spreading across the region. Now, Blinken's first stop is Saudi Arabia, where, as you said, he'll press for that proposed ceasefire deal recently drafted between the CIA, officials from Israel, Qatar, and Egypt. This blueprint calls to pause fighting for 6 weeks and arrange a hostage release between the Israelis and Hamas. Now, Qatar, which has acted as a key mediator between Israel and Hamas, sounded optimistic, but a Hamas spokesperson reportedly said this isn't happening. And Israeli officials are apparently divided, saying any deal would be perceived as a concession to Hamas. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan summed up the impasse, saying the ball is in Hamas's court. Now, also on the agenda, a push to get life-saving supplies to Palestinians in Gaza. Take a listen to Jake Sullivan previewing Blinken's trip.
And this will be a top priority of his when he sees the Israeli government, that the needs of the Palestinian people are something that are going to be front and center in the U.S. approach, and that we want to ensure that they are getting access to life-saving food, medicine, water, shelter, and will continue to press until that is done.
Now, it's worth noting the Biden administration has recently become more critical of Israel after a growing number of Democrats have voiced public frustration, demanding the president take a tougher approach and push for a ceasefire. So Blinken has a difficult needle to thread as he begins his high-stakes talks.
The U.S. is certainly promising further action, Richard, after the major strikes that we've been seeing on Iraq and on Syria and on Houthi targets. What is the latest there?
Yeah, Heather, U.S. forces reportedly launched a whole new round of airstrikes against Iran-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen. Officials say the militants were targeting ships in the Red Sea. That's a critical lane transporting goods and fuel around the world. And this comes just days after the U.S. attacked dozens of targets inside Iraq and Syria, but not in Iran. The White House says these strikes are just the start in response to that deadly drone attack by Iranian-backed militants that killed 3 U.S. service members, wounding dozens more at a remote outpost in Jordan late last month. Now, President Biden has said repeatedly the U.S. does not want to start a war with Iran, but the challenge for the White House moving forward is how to retaliate without sparking a wider war.
Richard, thank you very much. Richard Madden.